don't quote me on the number, but 80-90% of what we do and how we think is habitual. And every time you have a thought, a new thought, you plant a neural pathway in your brain. Let's just call it a thought seed, but it's just a thought. And this is where I think people get wrong. They set a goal, they reframe their thought, and they're like, okay, bam, it's going to work. It's not. It's just a thought seed. What you have in your head are all these myelinated, which means these seeds that have grown, right? Now they have roots and branches and leaves, and they're leading you. So what we need to do is plant that new seed. So maybe it's going for a walk first thing in the morning, or adding lemon to your water, or, once every training session, you push yourself just a little bit more than you want to go, whatever that new practice you want to have discipline towards. But then you have to push yourself to repeat that thought seed.
Hi, I'm Lauren Parsons.
And I'm Andy Jackson, and this is the ALWELLCo Podcast.
Dive deep with us as leading experts share their unique perspectives on topics such as recovery, sleep, movement, and the latest innovations in the space.
Well, welcome to the ALWELLCo Podcast, Haley. And, before we dive into your journey and who you are, etc., let's kind of just set the stage a little bit. So can you just share how we first connected, what drew you to the ALWELLCo community?
It's actually kind of fun to share that you and I first met for social reasons. I actually crashed your Thanksgiving. And it's funny because neither one of us is American, but from our roots, I crashed your Thanksgiving party with your wife, Lisa. I went as a partner with someone, and then you and I met. And then years later, we reconnected at another party. And you are a mover and a shaker. So within a week, we were back chatting and talking about how we can support each other and how I can support the ALWELLCo community. And Lauren, really nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you as well. Yeah.
Yeah, Lisa was very supportive of the, Andy, you should talk to Haley. You should talk to Haley. Haley would be good on the podcast. So she's obviously a big fan as well. So, well, let's jump into kind of, the early part of your journey. So much as Lauren, and I wouldn't quite call myself an elite athlete, but Lauren was D1 volleyball. I was a field soccer player. You were an elite athlete. You then moved into sports psychology, etc. So can you just talk us through that early part? What pivotal experiences led you to get into mental toughness and peak performance?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're all athletes. And if I'm completely honest, I peaked at 12 and peak performance peaked. But and it was actually at 12 that I decided to do sports psychology. And the short story is I was at the World Championships for my age group, and it was alpine ski racing, which was my sport. And I'm bib number 9, and bib number 8 is in the starting gate. I have about 45 seconds until it's my turn to go. And it's the slalom event, which is the short radius turns where you punch down the gates. And my coach pulls out $100 Canadian bill, and he places it in front of my face, telling me that he has bet on me to win this world championship. And then he tells me that he lost betting on a different athlete who was competing in a race the week before, a race that I was not in. And so straight-faced, he says, "I'm not prepared to lose today." He then pointed me in the direction of the starting gate, smiled, and told me to go have fun.
No pressure then.
At 12.
No pressure. So in that moment, now I can tell people, I didn't know it when I was 12, but in that moment, I was at an emotional and a mental fork in the road. And this is something, whether you're an athlete or not, this is something we are all in each and every day. From that pressure, I could feel anger, frustration, worry, fear. How could a coach bet on their athlete and then tell her right before she's about to compete? Or if my coach believes in me so much that he's willing to bet on me, why shouldn't I believe in myself? And for whatever reason, he knew me. Now, I don't recommend to coaches to bet on their athletes, but even though we do it as a business, but he knew that I would thrive under pressure, and I did. And I remember thinking, wow, if he has such high expectations, doesn't then mean I'm doing something right. Mm-hmm. And then my memory goes to, well, I've won every race so far this year. And this is a technical course. This is my course. And I'm in great top condition. So I went down, I did win. My coach came down, congratulated me, kept the money for himself. But he said to me, the start of my career, he said, "It's amazing what your performance can be when you get your head straight." And then 2 weeks later, he brought a sports psychologist to come and speak to my team. And I went home at 12 and I told my parents that I wanted to be a sports psych gal.
That's awesome.
That's amazing. Yeah.
It is. The way you said it too is beautiful. You can take that in one of two ways, right? You can take it and thrive, or you can shut down and really, there's your
Yeah, I think most people
performance.
would shut down, wouldn't they?
Well, I don't know
Under
about
fear.
maybe.
Not
Yeah.
the best, not what we do when we do well. It's embracing pressure.
Right.
And, in sports psychology terms, we talk about threat versus challenge. So we can take it on as a threat, or we can take it on as a challenge.
Right.
And there are many ways to go about doing that. Some people like to feel that anger. They can use that as, you tell me I can't, and I'll show you 100 ways how I can.
Yeah.
And then there are other people that doesn't work, but a challenge is, wait a second, they must believe in me. If they believe in me, then I can believe in myself. And then, all of the improvements and the growth and let's just show up, and using those nervous butterflies for good.
Yeah.
That's the challenge.
Yeah. Another great example I can think of is reframing being nervous to being excited, right? I mean, what's the difference other than the way that you think about it, really, and how you channel that energy?
It's
And so I
exactly
know
that.
that's something that athletes do really well, right? It's, no, I'm not nervous. I'm really excited. So
Yeah.
just another reframing. So you've worked with top athletes in corporations to overcome mental blocks, something we're starting to get into now. Can you give us some examples of who you worked with and what you did with those folks?
Yes. So no one comes to me when they're happy, right? People come to me when they're in a rut or they have a mental block. And they may not even know that they have a mental block. They just know that their performance isn't as it could be, or as they want it to be. So right then and there, that's a sign of confidence. If someone's coming to me thinking, I know I can do better, but I can't, or why can't I do better? There's this sense of belief. So that's the first thing we target. I always want to know what your strengths are. Because if we can find that confidence gives you more motivation, which gives you more focus, which helps you control the anxiety. So we'll start there. But then we have to attack that mental block. And a mental block in its simplest form is a story, usually negative, but not necessarily, that has the potential to debilitate our performance. And so what we need to do, Lauren, you said reframing. What we need to do is look at that mental block and see what we can do about it. And I really look at 3 strategies, which is what I talk about in my new book, Personal Podium. 3 strategies. First, nothing to do with the mind and everything to do with the environment. Can I change my situation? Can I manipulate something out here to automatically change how I feel in here? Now, sometimes that's, something as simple as just changing a piece of equipment. Sometimes it's changing teams. And you don't want to, just blame everything else. That's not where I'm going. But sometimes it actually is important to manipulate the outside so you can automatically change the way you perceive things on the inside. And if you can't do that, or if you can, but you don't want to, I mean, we can all quit our jobs, right?
Mm-hmm.
But not necessarily something we want to do, even though it may relieve some stress or add others. But the second question is, can I change the way I look at the situation? And that would be the reframing piece.
Okay.
And sometimes we can't do that because things sometimes just simply suck.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
then it's, what do we need to accept? And I'm sure you both have experiences in this. What do I need to accept, and accept with courage, not just give up, but accept? And then with the acceptance, how can I take control over whatever I have control over?
Yeah. Could you share a specific example, maybe where mental toughness training led to a huge breakthrough for somebody?
Yeah, actually this morning I was just texting with a former athlete of mine years ago. I keep in touch, and he is one of my greatest joys. So he was a baseball player at Princeton, and he had just overwent 2 hip surgeries, and he couldn't get out of his wheelchair. And his doctors and his surgeons and everybody, coaches, everybody was like, you can get out of your wheelchair. And the pain was just too excruciating. So his mother found me, and then he called me, and it was, I don't want to talk about the injury. I don't want to talk about my past. I don't want to talk about, just get me out of this chair if you can. We did. We got him out of that chair. He stood up within a week of working together, and with both physical and psychological rehabilitation, he was able to go back and play. And then he became a coach, and then he became a pastor, and he still talks about, the ability, I think he says, the ability for her to listen to my jumbled thoughts and basically press mute on the enemies inside. And with visualization techniques, with small goal setting, with again bringing back some level of confidence, we really worked on those things. He slowly stood up out of his wheelchair and then was able to return to his sport.
That's awesome. I know you mentioned before, sometimes situations just suck. We have to work through them. Kind of paralleling to that, in high stakes environments, pressure is just inevitable. What strategies do you recommend for folks to harness pressure positively and then maintain that for optimal performance?
So that's the name of the game, right? Yeah. Having a high performance when it matters most, and it usually matters most when there's pressure.
Yeah.
So it's really about becoming friends with pressure. Having it become your ally. And Lauren, you said, reframing your nervousness. Mm-hmm. Those butterflies can be swarming all over, out of control, right? And you can't get a hold of them, or you can. And it's not just about embracing the pressure. There's a real commitment and a belief behind that, and all of I call them productive truths, all of the reasons why you can embrace this pressure for yourself. And then those butterflies, I'll just use a symbolic imagery, those butterflies swarming around, you then take back control and you tell them to go into an inverted V, which is what a lot of athletes do. And why do birds fly above in a V formation? It's fast, it's efficient. And so those butterflies are now in an inverted V, helping you, depending on what you want to achieve, fast, efficiency. But there's energy that's now guiding you wherever you're going in a productive, actually better now in the pressure situation than if you didn't have the pressure. Mm-hmm. And that's what separates the great from just the very good. The great actually do better with the pressure. And there's a couple of things. I mean, it really depends on your relationship with pressure, but sometimes you have to say, like I said, wow, my coach believes in me. That's a lot of pressure though. I must be doing something right. And then you think about all the ways you can perform well. Or like you said, it's because you care. It's not only because you care, it's actually because you care and because you believe you can do something. Mm-hmm. If I show up to maybe it's like a martial arts class, I'm not very, it's not my sport. I'm not going to feel a lot of pressure. I'm not going to feel, because I don't have a lot of confidence in it. But if I show up on a ski mountain and people are coming to ski with me and they heard that I'm great, that's pressure. But that pressure is because I have confidence in myself.
Sure.
So they go hand in hand.
How do you think this applies to non-high performers in their professions and everyday life? Do you think it does at all?
I do. So when I'm giving keynotes, for example, or training workshops, and we're talking about stress and embracing pressure, because I'm all about exposing yourself to stress. So even though we're, non-athlete, we want to get off defense. We want to get on offensive play. And so, just ask people in the audience, who's ever asked for a promotion? Who's ever asked to lead a project? Hands go up. Who's ever volunteered to be married? Hands go up. Who've ever volunteered to have children? Hands go up. Purchase a property. That's you asking for stress in your life and putting pressure on yourself. And why? And the answers are, well, because I want to enjoy life and I want to have that experience and I want to have fulfillment. So it's the exact same concept. We just don't want the stress we don't choose. We want the stress we choose in life. Yeah. But you can use the same stories to embrace the stress you didn't necessarily choose in life either.
So dive in a little bit deeper. If you take the premise that self-discipline is crucial for success, and I find the same things sometimes on a day-to-day basis in my daily routine, having that self-discipline can be tough. So do you have any practical tips that you offer individuals striving to get that discipline in their daily routines?
Yes. First we have to understand why we need the discipline and why we need the repetition. And obviously I talk about the psychology of performance. So it's really important for us to understand that we are creatures of habit. Don't quote me on the number, but 80-90% of what we do and how we think is habitual. And every time you have a thought, a new thought, you plant a neural pathway in your brain. Let's just call it a thought seed. But it's just a thought. And this is where I think people get wrong. They set a goal, they reframe their thought, and they're like, okay, bam, it's going to work. It's not. It's just a thought seed. What you have in your head are all these myelinated, which means these seeds that have grown, right? Now they have roots and branches and leaves, and they're leading you. So what we need to do is plant that new seed. So maybe it's going for a walk first thing in the morning, or adding lemon to your water, or, once every training session, you push yourself just a little bit more than you want to go, whatever that new practice you want to have discipline towards. But then you have to push yourself to repeat that thought seed. Because the more repetition and practice, which is the discipline, that thought seed, the new one that's going to help you, will grow and grow and grow and grow and myelinate, and then become your new dominant thought. And the old one that wasn't serving you atrophies like any muscle, use it or lose it. So discipline is essential. And it's not just saying, okay, now I'm going to do this, and then maybe you do it once. It doesn't matter, because your habits are still holding on strong. You got to create with discipline this new thought seed, this new behavior, so it becomes your dominant. And so I think people have to understand the reason why we need to be disciplined and consistent. And then you come up with, I'm not a big believer in a lot. I like to do 1 to 3 things max. And there's a reason. There's Robert Gialdini, who's a social psychologist. He wrote a book called Yes, or the Psychology of Persuasion. And he says that if we focus on more than 3 things that we want to change, the confused mind says no, and we just resort back to old habits. So, if we're asking our kids, what do you want for dinner? I'm confused, but do you want turkey? Do you want fish? They can choose between the 2. So 3 is always the magic number, except for tasting gelato. Then the more the merrier.
Science.
And funny enough, because I know you guys are very much into the tennis shoes and the fitness footwear, but footwear, more the merrier with colors. People want to see all the varieties. But other than that, 3. So we really want to choose 1 to 3 rituals or behaviors that we can become disciplined at. And then you got to build.
Is there a number of reps that's needed to go from a seed to a root, or a number of days?
Yeah, great question. And I don't have a good answer. Some studies will say, 21 days. Some studies will say 60 days. For me, in my personal experience, and then in my private practice, it takes as long as it's going to take. And sometimes it's a matter of just how important it is to you. I know when I once got my blood tested, and I had candida, which is just this yeast infection going through my body. And overnight, I changed a pattern, so sometimes it can be that. And then there's others where I needed to persist. Sometimes you kind of fall back, and then you got to get back up on the horse. It really just depends on the behavior, your thought behind the behavior, and then your personality and the situation in which you're living.
So Haley, how are you applying this to your daily routine?
So I use accountability. I'm certainly lucky in my life that I have a partner who I live with, that we embrace these new things together. And so we're probably over a year now, but one thing that we started was non-negotiable every morning around, well, it depends on when we have to work, but non-negotiable every morning, probably around 6:45, we go for a walk. And it's been really cold in Colorado lately.
Oh, yeah.
So the consistency is in the walk. The variety is in the time of the walk. Sometimes it's been 1 minute, sometimes it's 20 minutes. So I like to partner up. I like to be held accountable, and I like to hold other people accountable. That's really key for me. And I like to do one new behavior that I can do first thing in the morning, because then that gives me confidence, which then empowers me to keep going for the rest of the day.
Yeah, it's funny is that Lauren knows this one. I'm a little bit predictable in the morning, and that every day when I open my emails, I always look at the oldest email to the newest. and I get a little dopamine fix rather than going for the ones that I know that are really awesome. I go through the mundane ones, and then all of a sudden I go, ooh, that's exciting, or ooh, that's exciting, and then go through them. It's my daily habit every morning that I do, and it works for me.
Interesting. I've never even thought about that, but guess what? Tomorrow I'm going to see. I'm going to go to the oldest first.
See how it makes you feel.
Yeah.
It's one that I do.
Yeah. And then Lauren, with your volleyball, yeah, there must have been some rituals, whether it was certain like in your pre-performance routine or something.
Oh yeah. I mean, we were so regimented and scheduled, and, certain people could say, yeah, I have certain things that I do before I serve, or, do different movements on the court, but really your life was very regimented and scheduled and practiced. And so I was very lucky to learn that in my college years of, okay, here's my day. I only have so many hours. What am I going to do to be successful? And then where's my downtime? Because if I'm go, 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 I don't have time for rest or recovery. That's not great either. So it was very much a learned behavior, thankfully, when I was, in my early 20s.
And you did it with your team, a lot of it.
A lot of it was with the team. So it was reinforced by, my peers' behavior, and they weren't doing things that I wasn't doing, right? So we weren't, going out and partying or anything like that. It was, oh, actually, we have to go to study hall and tutors now. All right, next we're going and we're eating, right? And so the fact that we had, like you said, partners to do it with us made it so much easier, because it was just what we were doing. And all your friends were there.
Yeah. And sometimes, though, I think we get so now that, I'm not with a professional team, you're not like, and Andy, sometimes I think we choose the wrong accountability person. I find this often. Sometimes we choose someone who's going to enable us more than hold us accountable. So when we choose, we have to be our greatest. We have to put forth that challenge ahead. Choose someone who wants you to succeed, who cares about you. But when you say, I wanted to follow through, but, and you give them all the reasons why you couldn't, they look at you straight faced and they say, the truth is you could. And then you're not allowed to get angry at them for telling you that either. You have to be able to take it in.
Yeah, the maturity there.
So Haley, we're talking about, how people change things. So we know that habits can significantly impact your performance. Let's go the other way. What approaches do you suggest for individuals aiming to break detrimental habits and establish more productive ones?
Yeah. I'll tell you what, I think the worst thing to do is just tell yourself to stop doing it. Stop thinking about the purple elephant. Stop thinking about the purple elephant. It doesn't work. The only way to eliminate one habit is to replace it with a new ritual. And hopefully it's around that timing or just actually before. So I've worked with people in the wellness industry, and they have a bad habit of eating unhealthy foods at 4 p.m. Let's just say, it's the 4 p.m. and all they do is they go into the pantry and they eat. So let's replace that habit at 3:30, 3:45, but don't wait till 4. But right before, you go ahead and you eat something that's going to be more serving. And then at 4 o'clock, you have a different activity. So you've eaten something. So you're maintaining that for a little bit, because if you just stop eating, it may be too difficult. So you've eaten something a little bit more healthy or a lot more healthy. And then at 4 o'clock, you're doing something else that takes you completely out of the pantry.
Yeah, very interesting. So in terms of, you've obviously seen a lot of, let's call it, detrimental habits with people. What in your experience is the number one habit you see people struggle with?
In my private practice, something that I'm really enforcing, and I kind of talked about it with confidence, is and it happens still, I'll ask people, for an achievement, and they'll go right to something that they screwed up on. Like they just don't even hear it. Or when someone, my coach said I did well in this race, but I still have to do this. We have to acknowledge our successes. Professional athletes, when we see them being interviewed all the time, they're pretty open and honest about what they did well and what they need to do better. Mm-hmm. And they have a period on what they did well. They let it sink in. And then that is used for more motivation, for more focus, for pushing their limits. So we really have to embrace a bad habit is not allowing yourself to take in the success. And I'm talking about the small successes too. Every day, what did I do well? and how can I do better? Where can I tweak things? But there has to be a pause, a full-on period after you focus on what you did well, so that it sinks in, you acknowledge it.
Yeah.
So that, if I think about exercise, I generally work out most days. So 2 days ago, I absolutely crushed the bike ride, absolutely annihilated it, building up my data, felt wonderful, etc. Came off the bike. Lisa said, boy, you're sweating a lot. How's your workout today? And I'm all excited about it. Last night, same thing. I went up. I kind of did 20 minutes, started doing weights. My head was not in it. Started looking at my phone. Started answering emails at the same time. That's doing that. How do you get that consistency to, try and maintain that habit? Try and maintain that, or halfway through your workout, it's not going great. So halfway through my performance, it's not going great. What should I do?
In all honesty, to me, it's that it doesn't always have to be. Let me put it this way. I don't always think that we have to be striving for that 1% better every day. A great, very popular theory and concept in sport and life is actually flow state. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, I hope I said that correctly. Say that 10 times fast. Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, a Hungarian American, he created the concept of flow. And I bring this up because it's really important. He talks about flow, which is peak experience, peak performance, where the demands of the activity match your current level of ability. So it takes work and it's there, but the demands are like the sweet spot of where you're at. Now, one step above is what he calls arousal zone. And that's when you go just above your current level of ability. So maybe that's what you felt, Andy, when maybe you're just pushing and it just felt so much, or maybe you're in flow, right? Great. But flow and arousal are hard to have every single day, especially because we need recovery. But you want to maintain the consistency, and you don't want to get down on yourself when you're not, that flow or one above. So he also introduces just below your current level of ability, which is called the control zone. Still takes effort, maybe a different way. Maybe the effort is just staying on that bike for the whole 30 minutes instead of getting off, even though the intensity isn't there. I was actually with you just yesterday. I got on my indoor cycle, and I mean, it was just amazing. I too was not there. And so I changed my goal in the spot. My goal was just to stay on it for the hour instead of necessarily achieving this heart rate or necessarily achieving this level. So that was the control zone. And I'm good with it, because the day before I was more, in the arousal. And so I think it's really important for us to understand that we get to play around in this control, flow, and arousal. And sometimes, due to uncontrollable circumstances, we may be placed in that. And as long as we don't go to the apathy and boredom, which is get off the bike completely, or create unnecessary anxiety for us, as long as we stay in the arousal, flow, or control, we're doing ourselves a service.
Yeah. Is that how you guide people to find the balance between challenging themselves, learning a skill, right? Because you can't be in flow when you're doing those things, versus flow, the optimal state. Is that how you guide folks with change your goal immediately, or what are your tips for that?
In those situations, I think it's either change your goal or quit.
Okay.
Because we get so frustrated and we create unnecessary anxiety, and it's not fun. So, but here's a very important thing to know. I encourage people to give themselves some grace. Sometimes things happen, or sometimes, we're not, we're testing certain nutritions, testing certain pieces of equipment, testing sleep, so we have to give ourselves some grace. Never let yourself off the hook. So changing a goal, modifying the goal is giving yourself some grace. Completely saying, I give up, I'll try again tomorrow. And then tomorrow never comes until Monday, right? Like this week's ruined, I'll just start again on Monday. That's letting yourself off the hook, and that doesn't help you.
Yeah. This leads really nicely into my next question, and it's around self-doubt, right? Because you let yourself do that enough times, you're like, oh, I'm not even really sure I can do it anymore. So, how would you advise people to manage and overcome self-doubt, to maintain the confidence in saying, I'll do it tomorrow, and to excel in their abilities?
This may sound interesting. It's a lesson that I learned. So my mentor, coach, probably the only person in this world that if she says jump, I'll say how high. She was listening to me one day and she looked at me and she said, okay, so you don't believe in yourself. Join the club. Like, so what? We all have self-doubt.
Yeah.
Get over it. So what? And I know that our top athletes on cameras, many of them will say, you just got to believe, and you do. But I have never met a single athlete who at one point in their life doubted, even if it's like the championship, there's a little bit of doubt. So it's normal human experience. The self-doubt isn't the catastrophe. The leaning on the self-doubt and letting that guide you and then changing your behaviors because of the self-doubt, the story you give the self-doubt, the significance, that's the catastrophe. Okay. So how do we combat that? Just as I said at the beginning, we start with confidence. With every person that I work with, whether you're corporate, wellness, sport, we're going to start off with highlighting your 3 greatest strengths. And in sports, we always talk about, it always comes down to the fundamentals. It's always back to the fundamentals. Well, in psychology, we have these fundamental strengths. These strengths, whether it's technical, tactical, strategic, we have these strengths that we know that are inside us. So if you're really feeling down and out, forget about what you're working on, forget about what you're trying to improve. Just for a moment, go back to your fundamental strengths. And so it's, again, give yourself some grace. Don't let yourself off the hook. Mm-hmm. Bring back those technical, tactical, strategic strengths. Lead with them. Stay with it. Prove to yourself that you have the discipline and the mental toughness. And then in time, get back to what you're working on.
Okay. Break it down to build it back up. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some of the elite athletes you've worked with. So I'm a recruiter, I'm a physical therapist, I'm a strength and conditioning coach. Lots of these people will be listening. So drawing on your experience with elite athletes, what common mental traits have you observed that contribute to their high performance?
When you said you were all these things, Andy, I knew you were good. I just didn't know you were there. You were all that.
I thought about our listeners. I wish.
When I think about, I have 2 athletes come to mind, and it's common, but 2 athletes come to mind where it was this belief that the mindset, I'm just going to figure it out. I'm just going to figure it out. And the second belief is if I go to speak to someone who's doing sports psych, they're going to make me think so much and they're going to, investigate and analyze. It's really not what I do. I think some people do that, but it's not really what I do. I have a belief, and it's actually to think less, more strategically. I want to help us, certain thoughts that are not helping. We need to learn tools to let them come and go. It's a concentration skill. We need to know what thoughts are irrelevant, and just like a flowing river, let them flow in, let them flow out. And then we also need to know the thoughts that are going to help us. And right now I'm thinking about these 2 athletes, and I'll share some stories
Please.
One was amazing, performed really well in practice, couldn't do it in competition. Now, this is a very common reason why an athlete would come to see a sports psychologist. Now, the mental block can be different. And for this particular person, it was intimidation. Intimidated by 3 specific opponents. I tell this story often, and I also tell it in my book. And it was, in practice, it was all about what this athlete needs to do to perform well. It was competition. It was all about what they're going to do to beat me. But the opponents were also his teammates. They were there in practice when he wasn't focusing on them. They were there in competition when he was. So it wasn't like I could have him have blinders on so he never sees his opponents. We had to do some reframing. And the, oh no, what are they going to do to beat me, became, thank you, opponents, for showing up. And I'll tell you how we got to that. In a discussion, I asked him, would you rather win? Because this athlete had the capability of actually, getting a gold medal, winning, being the best. Would you rather win against someone who's much weaker than you at your level, or you're not going to win, but you'll compete against someone much better? Who do you want to compete against? And he's like, every day I want to compete against my match, because if I win, then I know I'm worthy of it. So aren't you happy that these opponents showed up today? Because when you win, that's going to be the mark of true success. So it was, thank you, opponents, for showing up today. I want you to bring your best, because I know if you're bringing your best, that's going to motivate me to bring my very best and kick your butt. So we worked on that for 3 months, visualization. And at that level, small tweaks to physical within 3 months. It was more of the mental. He went off to Sweden to compete in the junior world championships. And not only did he beat those opponents, he became the junior world champion, made the US team, and then was a 2-time national athlete for that reframing. So again, it's embracing that pressure. It's bring it on. And, thank you. We don't want to win when everyone's at their worst. We want to win when everyone's also at their best.
Mm-hmm.
So you framed that in 3 ways, though. You also said, do you want to compete against people who you think are way better than you? And a lot of people will say, I want to compete against the best. And then they get crushed. How do you deal with that?
So, well, how do you deal with that scenario?
Yeah,
you have to know what you're going in for. So the reframing would be, for me, this is so cool. This is cool for me to have the opportunity. What can I learn from them? There's this thing in performance psychology called vicarious experience. It's a self-confidence tool. If they can do it, so can I. So what have they done that I can learn from? It removes the jealousy, it removes the envy, it removes the unnecessary, unrealistic self-doubt when you're playing against someone better. And then when you're with someone who's much weaker than you, instead of having a bad attitude, well, maybe you're the one that's going to role model.
Yeah.
And maybe you're the one that's going to teach. And what a great opportunity for you to really strengthen your fundamentals in that type of situation. All competition is good. We just have to know how to embrace each one.
Yeah.
So obviously your expertise is in sports. So let's just take a few examples that are similar to that. So someone's trying to build their physical therapy practice. They're trying to build their online weight loss business, their online fitness business. They think they found the best tech in the world. They think they're going to be the next Google or the next Patagonia or whatever they're going to be. What principles of mental toughness and peak performance could translate to, 1, get them to be realistic, is my view, and 2, help them build a business that is going to get them, let's say, 1/5 of the way to beat the next Google or Patagonia?
Yeah. I'm going to use myself, because that's kind of what I'm doing with my business. I have dreams, and I would never tell someone not to have a dream, but I also know that dreams can be very distracting. Dreams can be unrealistic. You may never reach that dream. And so the dream is not the focus on the day-to-day. I don't believe in setting a whole lot of goals, but I do believe in setting 2 or 3 goals. So 1, if you have that dream, fine, great. Never going to tell you not to have a dream. If you don't have a dream, like a long-term, going to be on, Google and all that, that's fine too. Don't let that hinder you. If you just kind of want to spread your wings and see what happens, that's great. What you do need to have, which was what I would recommend to everyone, is what I call next goal. And that could be a week, a month. I wouldn't go any further than a year, just because things happen and, you become aware of things you didn't know before. So you have that next goal, and maybe that's how many clients you want to have, or how many speaking engagements you want to have, or every, just some type of level of success that is within, again, going back to that flow. Is it going to be just below, at, or just above? And you have to decide that for yourself, where you're aiming. And everything is good there, as long as you own it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I believe in the now goal. And I like the acronym NOW, no opportunity wasted. And that's how you're going to get there.
Okay.
So how many podcasts are you going to be on? How many emails are you going to send each week? Who do you know that you can ask for guidance and, pick up the phone and call them? So those are the tangibles. So I'm okay with the dream goals as long as you don't get stuck on just focusing on the dream goal. You got to bring it down to your next and your now goals.
Okay.
And I've seen lots of businesses who grow to a certain level, and then instead of doing that day-to-day small goal, they keep looking for the next new shiny thing. How do you work with them to get them to stay in that kind of daily routine? What tips would you give them instead of them trying to create the next new thing, the next new thing, the next new thing?
Yeah. It might be actually interesting to use an athlete, like an athlete example. So an athlete who qualifies for the Olympics. So they've had all this great success, right? They were disciplined, they followed the strategies, they followed the practice, they got to the Olympics, and suddenly now they're changing, now suddenly they're changing what they want to achieve, changing their strategy, cutting corners, if you will, and it never, ever works out. The greatest, Cindy, she won the hurdles, and my mind's going to escape me, but I think she beat her own record 4 times at this Olympics, the 400-meter hurdles. And when you ask her, why was she able to win 2 Olympics in a row and beat her own world record yet again? She said, because I stayed with the strategy that worked.
Yeah.
And because she's staying with the strategy that works, she keeps climbing to new heights. But when you know something works, and like you said, Andy, you may now be looking for something shiny and new, and that's okay. But you can't just leave what you've just been doing that worked for you. You got to stay committed to those and keep it open-minded. And maybe the new dream realizes itself. Maybe it doesn't, but at least you'll have that current success, and you'll know that you've been doing the right thing.
So you live this and breathe this every day. I'm really interested to hear what personal practices you employ to not only, that week-long, year-long goal, but to remain at the top of your game, right? Because it's what's already working is working, like we just talked through. So what do you do personally?
Yeah, it's a great question. I get to teach it every day, therefore I get to learn it every day.
Okay.
But it really bothers me when you hear someone say, do what I say, not what I do. And the coach that's eating the donut while telling everyone to run laps, it's not the person that I want to be. I want to walk the walk. I want to talk the talk. And now, especially so I embrace the pressure is really what I do. I now know that I am being, on podcasts with the two of you, and I want to look a certain way, and I want to sound a certain way, and I want to be able to share certain stories. And in social media, when I'm posting, I'm not just going to post stories of athletes. I want to post stories of me doing the work myself. And so I embrace that pressure. And if I'm putting that expectation on myself, doesn't that mean I believe in myself and that I care? So I use that. And I also, because every day is not a success. I've certainly had failures and losses. And one of the best lessons that I've learned for myself, again, because I get to teach it, is that the defeat isn't the disaster. This is a masterclass that I just created, how to beat defeat, move on from failure to loss. The defeat is not the disaster. The story I give it, the meaning I give it, is the disaster. And so, I've had stories where one person showed up to a webinar I was giving, or one person showed up to this, or Amazon completely shut down my book launch because I was a new author. They didn't know who I was. And so I had to, be resilient. So the best that I can be, one of the greatest lessons for overcoming defeat, is to not only strive for perfection, but also strive to be the best recoverer I can be. And the best athletes are not the perfect athletes. They're the ones that best recover.
Yeah. Yeah. I really like that point. The defeat is not the disaster. I was talking with somebody last week now, and we were talking about failures. And I was like, I don't know if it's my age or just where I am in life, but no longer is a failure that defeat in that way for me. It's more of an outcome that I didn't have before, right? So it's like, well, if I wouldn't have done it anyway, I wouldn't have had the outcome. I wouldn't have the answer. And so now I don't know how to, I wouldn't have known how to take step 2, 3, 4, 5. And so I think that's a really interesting comment there of the
wisdom, Lauren.
Well, I am getting gray hairs, so maybe that's it.
No,
You've
you've got,
still got some.
I know, well, I'm only 35, but
no
I just
gray hair
really
at
like
35.
that. Yeah.
No, I mean, with every failure, with every defeat, you're creating your what if toolbox. Because now you know, what if this happens again? Well, now I know how to.
Yeah.
What if this happens again? And now I know.
Yeah. There's less fear of trying something, when you just do it and then move on with it, fail fast. So moving, switching gears just a little bit, I'm interested to hear what you think on this one, but do you see any trends or developments in sport and performance psychology that excite you the most? I mean, I know there's certain things that we go through decade over decade that maybe didn't work out as well as they did as the tried and true methods, but what excites you that's kind of new or developing out there?
It's interesting. And maybe I want to say that a focus that I want to maintain heightened awareness on. So I think it's wonderful. So please don't get me wrong. I think it's wonderful that mental health is a conversation now in all aspects of life. A lot of reception to it, a lot of resources for it. And I believe that mental health is not the same thing as performance psychology. Mental health is your social, psychological, emotional well-being. Performance psychology is, motivation, confidence, focus, and anxiety control. Now, they do work with each other. When you have one, often you can, develop the other two, but they are different. And so I think mental health is doing a fabulous job in getting recognized and people talking about it, and we're saving lives. I just want to make sure that we don't blur the lines between mental health and performance psychology, and we can do both, and we need both. And the performance psychology is, again, that embracing the pressure. And one example, my goodness, college sports. I have a passion for that age group, 18 to 25 years old, college sports. I'm a provider for athletes.org, which is all about helping college athletes. And the fact that they're now more than they've ever been, businesses, brands. I mean, the pressure and the extra responsibility. I just want to help these types of athletes embrace that pressure and make the most of it. Yeah. And again, that'll help both with their performance and their mental health.
Yeah,
but they are two different
afterwards,
things.
right? Because that's often talked about as a huge gap.
Huge
after college. Just how do you get into business and life and make that transition?
Yeah, that's one area actually that I work. There was a company in Toronto called Trilogy Sports, and it was exactly for that, to help athletes transition out into the world. And there's other alliances that Beyond the Game that does that too. And that's a huge focus of mine as well.
So Haley, as we get near the end of this kind of podcast, come on, give me a plug for your book. What's your book called? Where can I find it?
Yeah, so it's available one place, which is fun, Amazon, and it's called Personal Podium: How to Use Your Mind to Maximize Your Potential in Business, in sport and life. And the coolest thing that I think about this book is that there's so much types of goals, so much type of visualization, so much type of self-talk. I give you what I think. I really break it down because I like to work in groups of 3, as I said before. I break it down into what I believe is the nitty-gritty of each one. And then every chapter has a story of an athlete that I worked with. I changed the name, I changed the sport, but it's a compilation of stories where athletes have worked with these specific tools. So it allows us to kind of brainstorm how we can apply the exact same tools. It's not just concepts, it's tools and techniques.
Awesome. Well, as we wrap up, the core values of this podcast are strength, kindness, and perspective. You showed a ton of strength and a fantastically interesting perspective. The kindness bit, is there somebody in your life who was your mentor, someone who deeply influenced or inspired your journey you want to give a shout out to?
Yes, and he's no longer living though, but that coach, when I was 12 years old, he unfortunately, he had some bad luck and unfortunate circumstances, and his coaching career did not take off. but he goes down as one of my favorite people in the world. And he just knew how to read me. And I think that's an important lesson for coaches. He didn't bet on all his athletes. And I don't even know if he really bet on that athlete he told me he did and lost. I think it was just a tactic for him to add the pressure. But he really read his people. He knew who he was working with. And I think we can all pay attention to the people we're interacting with so we can better serve them. And of course, ourselves.
Just quickly before you sign off, don't forget to visit network.allwellco.com and join our professional network. You'll get to enjoy exclusive benefits from brands we love and have access to a community where learning and professional development are always at the forefront of everything we do.